Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 23rd edition of the Portland Planning Commission. I'll be your chair, Steph Routh. With us virtually, Commissioner Knowles, and in person, Vice Chair Spivak, Commissioner Brannan, Vice Chair Pollock, Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner O'Mara, Commissioner Alvarado, and Commissioner Ames. Today we'll be doing we have three agenda items. One is the Cesar Estrada Chavez Street Renaming Project, State Land Use Compliance Project, and Affordable Housing Opportunities Project. The first two of these include a hearing. So everyone who is here to testify in person and online, thank you so much for being here, and we'll get to you as soon as we can. Before we go forward, are there any items of interest from commissioners? Okay, hearing none. Yeah? Vice Chair Spivak? Oh, yes, log rolling. Excellent.
So I'm a volunteer in a separate capacity as a co-founder of Electrify PDX, and once a year we hold a big event, like 600 to 800 people at the Red, with 40 folks, organizations out there, BPS is a sponsor, community nonprofits, and anyone you like to talk to about electrifying your home, and try an electric vehicle or try an e-bike. It's all free, and I hope people can join. It's Saturday from 11 to 3, live music, bouncy castle, Ruby Jules ice cream treats. Induction cooking demonstrations. Anyway, if it's something of interest, then come on, join us. I'll leave some flyers out front. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Vice Chair Spivak. Can confirm it is a great time, and the ice cream sandwiches are delicious, not to be done at the same time as Bouncy Castle, please. Also the third agenda item, is the housing bonus assignment project. My apologies. Any other items of interest? Okay. Hearing none, we have two transmittal letters to give a thumbs up on. One, economic opportunity analysis. Can we get a general thumbs up? 1, 2, 3, 4. Also made us? Yeah, okay. Anyone object? Okay. And the CCIL, which it's been so long, I forget what it is a very long acronym. Transmittal letter. Can we get a thumbs up or a general nod? Something else? Okay, great. And with that, go to Chief Planner Patricia Diefendorfer for the Director's Report.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. Apologies, was looking for the mic here, buried behind the computer. Good afternoon, thank you all for being here. So I just have a couple of quick announcements. One is, we try to keep you apprised of when projects that have been through commission are making their way to City Council. So the recap project is going to full council on Thursday at 2 p.m. Thank you to Vice Chair Pollock and Chair Routh for coming to the Housing and Permitting Committee. We appreciated you representing the commission there. It was referred to the full City Council with a recommendation to approve at the committee, and so that's why it's making its way to full council on Thursday. So we will keep you apprised of the progress of that project. One last but quick update. Wanted to just share with you, obviously many of you I'm sure know that the city approved its budget last week. Just wanted to kind of give you a sense of what the budget, how things shook out for planning in particular, and maybe just a little bit of an overview of what it has done in terms of the overall Bureau. So just wanted to make sure the commissioners are aware that actually the planning division did take a 5% cut in the budget in the general fund resources that we have. And that actually represents an 11% reduction below current level of service. So we are relying on grants and other sort of temporary funding to make up some of that difference. But the 5% cut is essentially cut to staff reduction. So just wanted to make sure that the commission was aware of that. And obviously, that has largely been from our district liaison and area planning team, and that does kind of reduce our ability to kind of undertake more projects. And so there will be some, we'll have to figure out how to stagger our work plan accordingly. So I just wanted to share that. Bureau-wide, essentially, there were 6 cuts, 6 position cuts. 4 of them were vacancies. So fortunately, not too much in the way of layoffs. There were also 6 added staff in programs that have their own dedicated funding. So for example, PSEF and our solid waste teams. And realignment did have a pretty significant impact on the Bureau, with approximately 24 positions, actually in total about 28 positions, either having been realigned already or future and are part of future phases of realignment. So just wanted to kind of share a little bit of that picture for the commission. Happy to answer any questions, and I think that concludes my updates for you.
Thank you so much. And that's a lot. That's a lot to handle, especially with things like state compliance projects that need to be on a specific timeline. Any questions? Thoughts? Thank you for sharing that. And we'll hold that in our hearts as we are talking about timing and future projects. Next is our consent agenda, which would approve the minutes from the June 9th meeting. Would anyone like to be the brave soul?
I so move.
Commissioner Thompson, thank you. And second?
Second.
Commissioner Brannon. All in favor? Great. Oh, wait. Any opposed? Okey doke. Oh, thank you. Yes. I love it's better than Courier Pigeon. Great. Okay, so that passes. And to our first agenda item, Cesar Chavez Street Renaming Projects. Would love for the project team to join. And this is a relatively new to us, so I apologize that I don't know your names. Director Williams and crew. Take us wherever you'd like us to go.
Thank you so much. Millicent Williams, I'm the director of the Portland Bureau of Transportation. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. And the process, as you've acknowledged, is a little different and new for you. It is different and new for us. And I don't know that I would call myself a part of the project team as much as we are the implementation arm, but felt it necessary for us to come before this body to share with you what the process was that got us to this point, and as time allows, what we will do around implementation should the ordinance move forward or the resolution move forward as planned. So I'll provide a brief overview of what happened on May 26th, 2026, before the Public Works Committee. An ordinance, document number 2026-171, was presented, and its goals were to exempt certain code requirements under City Code Chapter 17.93, renaming city streets, and authorize the renaming of Cesar E. Chavez Boulevard within the city of Portland to Campesinos Boulevard. The action was referred to City Council with recommendations to pass. The vote was 5-0. Ayes were Canal, Koyoma Lane, Green, Smith, and Clark. There were no nays, and there was no one that was absent. The impact statements referenced financial and budgetary impacts, community impacts, and community involvement. And this overview or staff summary was prepared by Claire Adamczyk, who is a member of the Council Operations Policy Team. So what the ordinance does. The ordinance, again, document number 2026-171, renames Northeast and Southeast Cesar E. Chavez Boulevard as Northeast and Southeast Campesinos Boulevard, and waives the requirements of City Code Sections 17.93.010 through 17.93.050. It directs the city administrator to notify affected agencies and property owners of the name change through public notice and other appropriate means. It also directs the Bureau of Transportation to replace old street signs and install new street signs in accordance with the provisions of City Code Section 17.93.060. The issues discussed were the recognition of the struggle and movement of campesinos or farm workers, as well as the efforts of the Latino community organizers who worked on the previous street renaming process over 20 years ago. It also acknowledged the trauma caused by Chavez actions of late that were discovered and the need to repair community harm. It also spoke to prioritizing community effort over lengthy city code requirements. 10 people provided verbal testimony and 82 people provided written testimony on this item prior to committee action. And the general themes included honoring the contributions of Latino and immigrant agricultural workers and preserving the original intent behind the previous street renaming to acknowledge the farm worker movement. The desire to swiftly change street name at a time that immigrant communities feel vulnerable. The concern regarding waiving certain city code provisions without broader community process on the street renaming, as well as the cost to the city to update signage. Allowing more time for inclusion of residents impacted by the change due to their proximity to the street being renamed. Returning the name to 39th Avenue to restore consistency with Portland's numbered street grid and improve wayfinding. And aligning the street name change with community values of labor rights, equity, and social justice. And as you couldn't see, we didn't organize those points in any particular order. It was in order in which things were received and recorded. A little background, in 2009, City Council adopted Ordinance 18300 to authorize the renaming of 39th Avenue to Cesar E. Chavez Boulevard, following a multiple-year organizing effort by Latino community leaders to promote and to gather the petition signatures required for the city's street renaming process. On March 18, 2026, a New York Times investigation found evidence that Chavez, the co-founder of United Farm Workers, allegedly sexually abused many women and children who worked in the movement. Some of the same people who campaigned to rename 39th Avenue to honor farm worker labor advocate Chavez have come together to propose the street be renamed Northeast and Southeast Campesinos Boulevard to honor the collective efforts of the farm workers movement. The process and requirements for renaming city streets is described in Portland City Code, Chapter 17.93. The Portland Bureau of Transportation indicates that there is significant community interest in renaming streets to honor prominent individuals who have contributed to Portland, as well as interest in removing names of people whose actions are not aligned with community values. PBOT acknowledges the impacts of street name changes on residents, businesses, city operations, and external agencies. The street renaming process provided in Chapter 17.93 includes criteria intended to ensure that street renaming effort has community support and that it allows a time frame for the changes triggered by a street name change, such as signage, maps, and address changes. That concludes my formal statements, and I'll be happy to answer questions after. I'm not sure what happens next, but once informed of that, happy to respond to any questions that folks may have.
Thank you, Director Williams.
Thank you.
Who would like to talk next? You can Rochambeau.
Okay, I'm on. Well, good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. For the record, I'm Elijah Crawford, Chief of Staff to Portland City Councilor Loretta Smith. And I'm here today on behalf of Councilor Smith's office to offer some remarks in support of the ordinance and the rename of Cesar Chavez Boulevard to Campesinos Boulevard. We understand the deep history attached to the current street name. We also understand the pain, pride, struggle, and sacrifice that went into the original effort to secure visible recognition of Portland's Latino community, farm workers, labor leaders, immigrants, and everyone connected to Por La Casa. This is exactly why this proposal matters. The goal is not to erase that history. The goal is to tell a further truth and to honor the broader movement, not one individual alone. In light of the serious and credible allegations against Cesar Chavez, we believe the city has a responsibility to act with care, with honesty, and with urgency. Campesinos means farm workers. This name keeps the focus where it belongs, on the workers, families, organizers, immigrants, and community members whose labor fed communities, strengthened the labor movement, and helped shape the fight for dignity and justice. Councilor Smith's office worked closely with Martha Guimbez, community leaders, and more than 30 community organizations and individuals to arrive at a name that honors the history of farm workers and the labor movement while also responding to the concerns raised by community members in the public. We also wanted this process to move swiftly, but not silently. Bringing this matter before the Planning Commission gives the public another opportunity to engage, ask questions, and be heard before the ordinance returns to City Council for a final consideration. We recognize that any street renaming can create administrative impacts for residents, businesses, and institutions along the corridor. This is why clear notice, coordination with PBOT, communication with property owners, and coordination with public agencies and emergency services will be important as implementation moves forward. But the larger question before us is about values. Who do we honor in our public spaces? How do we respond when new truths come forward? And how do we preserve the legacy of a movement while refusing to ignore harm? Councilor Smith believes Campesinos Boulevard is the right answer. It honors farm workers. It honors Por La Casa. It honors the original movement for visibility and dignity. And it allows Portland to move forward with integrity. For those reasons, we respectfully urge the Planning Commission to recommend approval of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here, Elijah. I know it's persnickety.
Thanks. There you go. Thank you. My name is Shelly Romero, and I've lived in the same neighborhood in the Foster Powell area for over 30 years. I'm here after 5 p.m. and in my personal capacity, representing myself and the Por La Causa Committee. I was one of the original members in the effort to rename 39th to Cesar Y. Chavez Boulevard, which comprised of a 3-year effort, 2 efforts over 3 years, and was certainly memorable. Regrettably, due to unforeseen circumstances, our Por La Causa Committee co-chairs Martha Guimbez and Jose Romero are unable to be here tonight, so I'm going to read a statement on their behalf. I'm here today to urge your support for renaming of Cesar Y. Chavez Boulevard to Campesinos Boulevard, so it properly honors the campesinos, or the farm workers, a name that is always meant to recognize. Before I speak about the name itself, I want to say this very clearly. The process 17 years ago was not celebratory for many of us. It was painful, hostile, and at times deeply traumatic. Many now drive Cesar Y. Chavez Boulevard or take the bus, walk, bike, and they don't know what Latino and Latina leaders endured. We were publicly mocked, insulted, faced intimidation in our own neighborhoods simply for asking for visibility and dignity in our own city. Some of us sat in council chambers and at the Planning Commission, and we carried fear while also holding grace intact. We spoke up despite feeling this fear and doubt. The truth of Cesar Y. Chavez's violence against women and girls has caused extraordinary, unimaginable pain in our community. And for those of us who experienced this violence in our lives, it was especially re-traumatizing. But even through sadness, anger, conflict, we stood together and we refused to silence our pain. for the sake of nostalgia or convenience. We refuse to protect the legacy at the expense of the survivors and their truth and the truth. The ordinance that has been introduced that we seek your support for is about telling a fuller truth and choosing values larger than any one symbolic individual. There has been too much indirect talk about who belongs, who is right, or who deserves recognition first. The truth is, we need everyone, and we cannot ignore deeper harms that can exist between organizing spaces. As our dear friend and sister in the movement, Avel Gordley, would say, no movement grows stronger by refusing self-reflection. It always requires historical memory. Those who fought for farm workers' rights years ago were once the next generation themselves, building on the wisdom of those who came before them. And this is how movements survive in Latino, Latina, and indigenous cultures. Elders are the living memory of the community, and the younger generations are taught to listen and learn. Movements grow when people listen to understand, lead with humility, and carry toward a future that campesinos fought to create for their children. This is why we believe campesinos deserve recognition in our city, not for a single figure, not for mythology, but for the people, the mothers working in the fields before sunrise, the work of breathing poison and dust just to reach production goals. They cough but continue because they have no other choice. The immigrants who bend their backs in pain so others can eat, including each one of us. The children forced to grow up too fast, translating for their parents in hospitals, schools, and government offices, a responsibility that is far too heavy for their ages. And the ones who died working in extreme heat or cold, who never made it back home or who were forgotten by the very system that they sustained. For generations upon generations of Black and brown people who carried this country on their shoulders, and ultimately, the campesino and the campesina who represent hope, esperanza. Long after we are gone, we will still drive this boulevard. What story will its name tell? We are asking for a name that reflects our community's strength, honesty, and inclusion. Please vote in favor of recommending the ordinance to Portland City Council to rename this corridor Campesinos Boulevard y que vivan los campesinos. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for being here. We might, at the close of testimony, if we have other questions, could we, thank you. Cheers. And great, any questions? I should have asked, sorry, are there any questions for information before we go to, sorry.
Yeah,
Commissioner
I
Rhodes.
heard
I'm so sorry.
something about the results of a vote. So if it was voted at City Council 5-0,
That's correct.
Committee.
and then at Council Committee, and then it comes here, and then it goes back to Council?
In this case, yes, I think we're building the bicycle while riding it.
Got it,
Right.
okay.
Yes, the process is a little misaligned. And so what would normally happen is that something like this would come before the Planning Commission, before it goes to a committee, and then goes to full council.
But it just skipped that?
We didn't skip it. It was an acknowledgement that, as the chair has stated, the review of what's required was discovered as the city attorney's office reviewed the process and informed the crafter of the legislation or the resolution that this was a need. When the city council put forward the notion to waive all of the standard requirements, it was the assumption that this was a part of that. And given that this is a state requirement, this is not something that city council has authority to waive. And so the unfortunate circumstance is that the process was taken out of order. But the goal was not to fail to demonstrate respect for the process, in as much as there was an urgency, as was stated by Elijah, to move the overall effort forward based on what was happening in community and the name and the impacts that it was having on folks.
Okay, thank you. And so then it'll go back to committee now again?
I think it goes straight to council.
It'll go, pardon me, Patricia Diefender for the record. Yeah, it'll go to council after. So the planning commission will transmit its recommendation and then it will go to the full council.
And I will say that this is a couple of weeks ago when we were at recap before council committee, there was also some questions as to what was within the committee's authority to amend, given our process. So it is definitely, we are building the connective tissue between advisory bodies and this new form of government. And we all get to be a part of that exciting experiment that is democracy. So thanks, everyone. Any other questions? Yeah, sorry, thank you.
I don't want to delay getting to testimony. I think I will have more questions, but I'll defer those to later. I think now I'm just trying to get like a solid foundation of what the process is and what Oregon statute dictates, how that is or isn't the same as the local statute that the proposed order was trying to, I guess, forestall, for lack of a better word, in this instance. And is there anything else about the state statute that we should be aware of from a process standpoint, aside from the Planning Commission recommendation?
Thank you for the question. As we understand it, the city's process, which is inclusive of the state's acknowledgement around the inclusion of the Planning Commission in the process, is sufficient to move the process forward. There is not additional need to engage with the state to make a determination about local matters. However, as it relates to the renaming of a street of significance, or any street actually, there is the state requirement to go through the Planning Commission, but the rest of the process is something that's established by the city, which we can discuss, but I anticipate that you would like to hear the testimony. It's more an administrative process than anything, but it does require extensive engagement with community, ensuring that there are signatures that would approve the motion forward, then the council actions, and then the implementation actions from the identified bureau or agency or department or office that would move things forward. And in this case, that is the Portland Bureau of Transportation.
Okay, thank you. And then one quick follow-up question. Does the Community Involvement Committee typically have any formal role in street renaming, or is it discretionary typically?
For the record, Patricia Diefender for Commissioner Thompson, just wanted to point out in the memo that we sent to the commission is a description, just for your information, of the requirement in the ORS. So the what it states is that the Planning Commission makes a recommendation within 6 miles of the limits of the city. The commission shall recommend to the city council the renaming of an existing street, highway, or road other than a county road or state highway, if in the judgment of the commission such renaming is in the best interest of the city and the 6-mile area. So that's the technical action that's before the commission. As far as your question about the CIC doesn't have a role in this. So I think both the city's zoning code essentially memorializes what the state law requires, and I just kind of tried to share with you what the state law requires. Hopefully that's helpful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Commissioner Knowles.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I can't be there with you. First, I want to thank Shelley for her very eloquent statement, which I certainly endorse. So thank you for being here, Shelley. I do have a couple of questions. They are process-oriented questions. And I think I will start with Director Williams. Sorry, I'm not there to say hello in person. So did PBOT send any sort of notice, specific notice to property owners or renters along Cesar Chavez, or what's known today as Cesar Chavez Boulevard?
No, the Bureau did not send any communication.
And did the staff or the Bureau send any sort of public notice to the usual groups, to neighborhood associations, community groups, any of those kinds of folks?
No, the Bureau did not do that either. This was not something that the Bureau was introducing. And typically, when this type of process is being under consideration, the folks who are responsible for gathering or garnering the support provide the level of outreach that's necessary. Once a determination is made, then the Bureau would be responsible for ensuring that that notification to residents along the corridor with adjacency to the corridor are notified, as well as all the other partners that would need to be notified.
Okay. And I think this is a question for planning staff. Did, in noticing this hearing, did the planning staff provide any sort of notice? Or maybe I should ask, what was the notice given for this hearing? Where did it appear? Was there any sort of mailing to neighborhood groups or to community groups or to individuals?
Commissioner Knowles, Patricia Diefendorfer. So I just wanted to point out that the ordinance that was introduced at the Public Works Committee, one of the actions that the ordinance includes is an action to exempt certain code requirements under City Code, Chapter 1793, renaming city streets, as Director Williams noted. So that particular aspect of the ordinance speaks to essentially exempting this particular street naming from some of the typical processes, including some of the typical notification. I think it was expressed in the testimony that has just been provided, or the presentation that was just provided, that I think there was such an extensive process in the 2009 effort to rename to Cesar E. Chavez Boulevard that, and I'd love to have Shelley speak to this again if that's appropriate, but I think that there's a recognition that that process was a lengthy process. It resulted in an expression of the intent to honor a certain community, and so I think that this is building off of that, and that's one of the reasons why there's a proposal as part of that ordinance to exempt from some of those processes.
Okay, well, that doesn't really answer
Yeah.
my question. What was the notice that the planning department or bureau provided for this hearing?
Right, so for the Planning Bureau, what the notice that we provided is what we typically provide for the commission agendas. We have a list of, I believe it's about 800 people, 1,000, okay, apparently it's that, is it a, okay. Is there a number? Is it 800 people? So there's a list of people who are asked to be on a distribution list for any commission agenda. It is that group of people who received the notice for this meeting, and there was no other notification besides that.
Okay, so they received a notice of the meeting that we're having today, which included this item along with several others.
Correct.
And I would just note that while the draft ordinance may propose waiving the requirements of Title 17, that ordinance hasn't passed, and as we sit here today, those requirements are still in place. Is that correct?
I think that the ordinance is an expression of the process that the City Council Committee, at least, is supportive of. So if the Planning Commission wants to make any kind of recommendation related to process, that's something that I think that you all can consider in your deliberations, and that would be passed on to the council as part of your transmittal letter.
Okay, thank you.
May I speak to the process some 17 years ago? I promise you there was a lot. We endured 3 years and 2 different efforts. We started by looking at renaming Interstate, and quickly learned that that was not palpable. We went to neighborhood association meetings. I remember one in particular at Ockley Green had like 150 people. It was pretty hostile. We went to neighborhood associations. The Arbor Lodge Neighborhood Association comes to mind, as well as a number of other neighborhood associations along Interstate. When Interstate was voted down by council, we were then told by council that if we wanted to rename a street, we would have to come up with another alternative. And so we considered 3 Grand, Broadway, and 39th at the time. And we were prescribed a process that we had to follow. And so they named a 3-person historic panel. And that historic panel held at least 3 hearings that were publicly noticed and pretty well attended. I remember going to all of them, but in particular one at the Hollywood Theater. In addition, we were required to collect signatures. I can't remember the total amount, but I want to say it was like 2,500 or something, a lot. 2,500, I was right, okay. I collected about 500 myself, and these all had to be then verified by the auditor's office that the people who had signed the petitions and the signature collection were people who were people who lived within the city of Portland. In this new instance where we're working to rename the corridor to Campesinos, we've done extensive outreach. We have a huge coalition of supportive organizations and individuals. I think Elijah referred to about 150. We have done that outreach. I know that you're going to potentially hear from people who want to rename the street back to 39th. And what I want to say is nobody would willfully put themselves through the city's process, particularly because you never know what process you're going to get. We happen to get one of the most rigorous, I think, our process, as well as the process to rename Union for MLK back in the day. But every process afterwards has been different. And so I would just say that even though there may be people that are really passionate about renaming it back to 39th, I don't see them coming forward and saying we're willing to put ourselves through the city's process and endure anywhere near what we endured to rename 39th the first time. Thank you.
I get this wrong every time. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other clarifying questions before we move to? Okay. Thank you for real.
So Chair Rouse,
never mind.
I do have one more question.
Yes, please.
Sorry. And it has to do with notice. So did the city council subcommittee provide any notice beyond just the general notice of the hearing on this item?
Yes, the Public Works Committee just provided the general notice that the ordinance was on the agenda, and there was also public comment on the agenda item in committee.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Commissioner Thompson.
I'm trying to understand like the testimony lay of the land. So there's been a couple of versions of packets of testimony that have been sent to the Planning Commission. I think as recently as like a few hours ago. And so I'm just trying to understand if that is all new testimony directly to the Planning Commission, if that is completely distinct from I think it was the 10 and 80 testifiers in person and online that Director Williams referenced. And then there have also been, I think within the testimony, we received references to hundreds of pieces of testimony. So if you can just help clarify who's through what channels and how much and just where we're at with that.
Commissioner Thompson, I can help clarify that. We did not have the map app set up for this item for Planning Commission, which is why we used the alternate method of collecting written testimony for the Planning Commission, which is essentially the testimony being emailed to the Planning Commission email address. So Autumn pulled all that testimony together and sent it to you in batches. So what you have received from Autumn in the last 2 days is testimony that is directed to you as the Planning Commission, separate and apart from testimony that was submitted to the City Council. Is that helpful?
At City Council, there were 80 pieces of
At
testimony
City
or
Council,
hundreds?
at the time of the Public Works Committee, there were about 80 pieces of testimony, written testimony, and about 10 testifiers. Since the Public Works Committee, there have been much more, in the order of 600 pieces of written testimony. And so that's obviously people continuing to provide written testimony. Meanwhile, this procedural step had to be taken, and so we have agendized this for this body, and the testimony that you've been receiving from Autumn the last couple of days is the testimony directed to you.
Great questions. Any others before, for the third time, I invite our invited guests? Okay, I think this one's for real. Thank you. Also, I believe for our agenda today, our first and second, our second one we really need to get through today, but our third can be, if this takes a while and this needs to take the time that it takes, that we can continue that to a different day, correct?
Chair Routh, yes, I just wanted to clarify that the third item is simply a briefing in anticipation of future hearing and work sessions for the Planning Commission. We structured the agenda purposely so that that can be postponed if need be. So we can hopefully make that decision a little bit later, but we could do that, but we would just have to continue the item at the time. Okay, thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. So this takes the time that it takes. Thank you. We will now begin oral testimony. And I have some things to read. You can check out for a few minutes if you would like. Thank you to those who have registered to testify. We're so grateful for you. If you have not yet signed up to testify and are here in person, you can testify by filling out a paper sign-up sheet available at the side table and give it to Autumn, our amazing commission clerk. We have 6 testifiers registered to provide oral testimony today. In order to hear from everyone, the commission would appreciate everyone's cooperation in preserving order. I'm just going to read this. We're all going to be great. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conduct your testimony, conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or commission deliberations will not be allowed. I will call testifiers in the order of registration, which was emailed to all testifiers last night. Your testimony should address the proposal before the commission, and when testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. If you are a lobbyist, please identify your organization you represent, and virtual testifiers, so that we can hear you, please unmute yourselves when I call your name. We will have 3 minutes per person testifying. Thank you again. And with that, our first 3 are Kyle Warner, Paige Chandler, online, I hope, and Jerry Hansen. Thank you both for being here.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for your service, and thank you for hearing my remarks and for reviewing my written testimony. My name is Kyle Warner, and I live on Northeast Cesar E. Chavez Boulevard. I'll preface my remarks with a clarifying statement that last week, this item was on the City Council agenda. It was pulled the day before and referred back to Councilor Smith's office, which is why there are over 621 written testimonies submitted. Just to clarify that point, not just 80 at the committee hearing. At the time of the meeting last week, the council did not explicitly state this was on the agenda for the Planning Commission today with a time and date and place, which would have been appreciated. I'll continue now. I respectfully ask that you do not recommend that the City Council adopt item 2026-171, which waives requirements from City Code Chapter 17.93 to rename Cesar E. Chavez Boulevard to Campesinos Boulevard. The relevant sections of Chapter 17 were adopted to avoid this exact scenario and ensure adequate opportunity for community input and review. This ordinance is being presented by a council member whose district does not include the boulevard and by outside lobby groups that are located in Woodburn, Oregon, not even in Portland, excuse me. While I have no issue removing the name Cesar E. Chavez, it would be sensible for any non-urgent matters to be deferred given the fiscal challenges Portland currently faces. Additionally, I support honoring farm workers, but prefer to do so in another appropriate manner. In 2009, a city survey showed the majority of residents that responded to a poll, these are residents on the boulevard, to change 39th to Cesar Chavez Boulevard opposed it by 694 to 91. 88.4% preferred 39th. Yet despite that, this planning commission at the time recommended the street be renamed. Again, this year, the written testimony submitted to the council overwhelmingly opposes waiving the ordinances to change the name to Campesinos. 95.8% of the 621 people who submitted written testimony prefer 39th Avenue. I submitted a tabulated spreadsheet for your review in written testimony. Only 20 people, or 3.2%, submitted testimony in support of the name Campesinos. I hope this body will listen to the people this time and not disregard the majority opinion. Many local leaders have spoken about the idea of no kings and attended the associated rallies. Yet when it suits them, it seems they have no issue putting their agenda above the will of the people and bypassing all governing regulations to achieve their end. I digress. Why can't we turn this into a win-win for everybody? Why can't we name the next amazing park, community garden, or new street after Campesinos or another figure from the farm worker community? Why can't we restore the name 39th Avenue as the residents of the street prefer, which by doing so would also remove Chavez's name and not cause any harm? Doesn't that seem reasonable? As a private resident, I did submit 2 applications to rename Cesar E. Chavez Boulevard to 39th Avenue and 39th Street. Both applications were denied and as they do not meet the criteria of being the name of a person of historical significance. If an application to rename the boulevard to Campesinos were submitted through the normal process, it would also be rejected on the same grounds. I ask you to do the same this evening so the City Council can find a more suitable solution that considers all parties in a fair and meaningful way. Thank you.
Do we have Paige Chandler? I'm not seeing. Yep, okay. Great. Jerry? Yes, please, you're up, thank you.
Members of the Planning Commission, my name is Jerry Hansen, and I'm a resident of Richmond neighborhood for 30 years. For the first 15 of those years, I volunteered as a Saturday morning crew leader for Friends of Trees, and my crews put about 1,500 trees in the ground. Aging out of that, I began tutoring GED students through a library program, and today I'm an ESL tutor. Today, you're being asked to endorse an ordinance that waives the city's established code for public input, rushing through a street renaming and excluding the community. The Richmond Neighborhood Association was not consulted. 39th Avenue bisects neighborhood. There are about 13,000 residents along this street, and there are many neighborhoods north and south of Richmond, and I suspect they were not consulted either. I prepared a graphic for you. I hope you can take a moment to look at this. I hope you ask me how I prepared this. I'm particularly pleased with this, but I pulled off 584 testimonies, ran it through my magic AI machine, and what you see is the condensation of the data, of the written data. Nearly 93% of the public is asking you to restore the name 39th Avenue. When have you ever seen 90% of the public agreeing on something like this? I'm not here today to oppose honoring farm workers. I suggest that we find a solution that everyone wants. As planners, you understand numbered grid is intuitive and equitable. It provides a universal way for residents, visitors, delivery services, first responders to navigate our city. We can fix that mistake made in 2009 and create a true win-win. First, we restore the name to 39th Avenue, which honors the overwhelming consensus of the community. Second, we honor farm workers in a way that actually reflects their legacy. I suggest looking at the Portland Community Gardens, for instance. Why not find a way to use the Campesino name with the act of actually growing food? We are presented with a false choice today. We don't have to sacrifice our city's navigational grid and the overwhelming preference of residents to honor farm workers. Please recommend to the city that they follow the established process in which I believe the citizens will hardly ask for a return to 39th. Let's honor the farm workers authentically rather than on asphalt on a numbered street. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, great. And then other three, Anthony Valdez, Armando Gonzalez, and Beth Warner. Thank you. Anthony? You try it.
There? I don't know. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. All right. Well, good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Anthony Valdez. I'm a Portland resident and I own a Portland-based marketing PR agency. And I'm a lifelong Oregonian and grew up in Woodburn that was mentioned and part of that farm worker community. Today, I'm representing PODED, Oregon's Latino Leadership Network, which is a statewide Latino advocacy group. I'm here in support of the proposal to rename Cesar E. Chavez Boulevard to Campesinos Boulevard. Street names tell future generations who we are, what we value, and whose contributions we honor. As someone who grew up in Oregon's farm worker community, I have seen firsthand the sacrifices made by my family and others, men, women, and at one time children who worked in the fields. Our labor helped build our agriculture economy, feed our communities, and create opportunities for future generations, including my own. Today, Portland is known for its food culture, farmers markets, restaurants, and connection to agriculture. That reputation did not begin in a restaurant or at a farmer's market. It began in the fields. Behind every meal served in Portland and across Oregon and across this country is a workforce that plants, cultivates, and harvests the food that sustains our communities and supports one of Oregon's most important industries. Campesinos Boulevard honors those workers. It honors the thousands of farm workers and families like mine who have contributed and have shaped Oregon's economy, culture, and identity for generations. Most importantly, it recognizes a collective legacy rather than a single individual. It acknowledges the people whose work continues today and whose contributions have too often gone unseen. Long after this discussion is over, future Portlanders will see the street name and be reminded of the workers whose labor helped build Oregon and its brand. I can think of a few names that better reflect the values of hard work, dignity, community, and contributions that have shaped Oregon. I respectfully ask for your support. Gracias.
Thank you. Armando Gonzalez?
Good evening, honored members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I am representing the Por La Causa Committee. My name is Armando Gonzalez. I'm a business owner, retired educator, and a 37-year resident of Southeast Portland. I live about 5 blocks from Cesar E. Chavez Boulevard. I was born in Eastern Oregon into a large farm worker family. I'm here tonight to ask you for support for renaming Cesar E. Chavez Boulevard to Campesino Boulevard. The last few months have been incredibly painful and had led me to reflect on what the farm worker struggle has been for me, personally and professionally. Growing up, my parents taught me to work hard, study, and support the community. My parents believed in education and advocating for those in need. From them, I learned to participate in local community issues and to work for social change. At home, I also learned the importance of being bilingual, bicultural, and proud of my heritage. While working as a farm worker, I witnessed the significant contributions that we made for the economy. I also saw the tireless work of campesinos, often in the toughest conditions. The pursuit of dignity, human rights, and living wages led the farm worker by the farm worker community inspired me. As a result, I pursued a higher education, earned my master's degree, and worked and retired in education, and also started my own business to contribute positively to our community. 17 years ago, my family, my wife, and my 3 children worked on the campaign to rename 39th Avenue to Cesar T. Chavez Boulevard. We followed the process twice. While at times we encountered hostility, we also received overwhelming support from the local community. Ultimately, in 2009, the City Council voted to approve the name to Cesar T. Chavez Boulevard. Our Por La Causa Committee believes that the name change to Campesino Boulevard represent the shared struggles of the farm worker movement. Tonight, I urge you to formally support the official rename of Cesar T. Chavez Boulevard to Campesinos Boulevard. Recognize the immense contributions of farm workers who work every day, often in the harshest conditions, to grow and harvest their food. They are essential workers who deserve respect and recognition. Our committee has secured broad coalition support for this change. My family and I ask you to join us in honoring the past and present contributions of Oregon's campesinos. Take action now and support the change with a yes vote for Campesinos Boulevard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Beth Warner? Yes.
My name is Beth Warner. I'm a second-generation Portlander, as is my husband. Throughout our entire lives, until 2009, Cesar Chavez Boulevard was known as 39th Avenue. This made perfect sense since the majority of the north-south streets in Portland are named numerically. To this day, I still refer to this major north-south thoroughfare as 39th, as do many residents of the city. I don't think I was alone in questioning the renaming of 39th to Cesar Chavez in 2009. Today, in 2026, we find out Chavez was not an honorable person and the street needs to be renamed. I am asking the Portland Planning Commission and the Portland City Council to please consider renaming the street to its former and historic name of 39th Avenue. Many residents already refer to the street as 39th. It is fine to honor campesinos or farm workers, but does it make sense to name this particular street in honor of farm workers? I don't see the connection, and I think I speak for many Portlanders. Portland is a city of parks, of beautiful parks. Surely there is a park in Portland that can be renamed Campesinos. Campesino is a rural agricultural worker or farmer who has a deep connection to the land, often working small plots and cultivating crops for both family consumption and market sale. Wouldn't it be fitting to name a large parcel of land rather than a street, Campesinos, a place where Portlanders can gather and celebrate and honor our Latino residents? Let's make it right this time and give careful consideration to how we rename one of Portland's major thoroughfares. Let's not fast track this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Did anyone else sign up to testify, Autumn? Okay. Last call. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We are now closing oral and written testimony for the purpose of ours. And now, are we going to a slide presentation or? Forgive me.
Chair Roth, I think this is the time for the commission to deliberate, ask additional questions of the presenters here, the staff. So,
Great. Thank you. Thoughts, questions, comments? I can start just to say, I know the revelations from that were that were elevated by the Times a few months ago were, I would say, tectonic to a lot of our communities. And I've seen just in communities in East Portland and District 1, the deep pain and harm that people have experienced and have been working through. So I just want to honor that and know that is why we are here. And overwhelmingly, I think with very few exceptions, almost everyone can. I haven't heard many folks want to keep Cesar Chavez in light of the revelations, and also that so many people have looked up to him for so long, and that has real consequences to people. And I understand that we're in a different questions of process. But there's also like a very large human element that has brought us here today. So I just want to acknowledge that, honor that, and appreciate people, especially in this moment in our collective history, that while we're navigating a lot of other uncertainties and challenges, that we are also navigating this one. So I just want to kick us off there.
Chair Ralph, my apologies. I forgot that I have a slide that I would like to share very quickly that just outlines what the actions are that are before the commission. And then please, I'd love you to continue to deliberate. This might be helpful, and I forgot that I was supposed to share it. So here we go. I'm going to try to share that now. Okay. Okay, so in case this is helpful, just wanted to be sure that the commission is aware of what the action is that is before the commission. So the action is for you to recommend that the city council adopt the ordinance that does two things. It authorizes the renaming of the street, obviously, within the city of Portland's boundaries to Campesinos Boulevard, and it does exempt certain code requirements under city code. For part of that outlines the various processes for engaging community and notification. Based on the earlier discussion, obviously, the commission's recommendation ultimately can speak to the latter if that is appropriate. And I think that just concludes. And of course, as we outlined in the memo, the kind of the charge of the commission is to look at that. It's kind of vague, but is this renaming in the best interest of the city? That's kind of the underlying evaluation that the commission is making. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Commissioner Knowles.
Hi. Okay. Well, as you could probably tell from my questions, I have some concerns about the process here. So I think I want to propose a couple of things, but before I get to that, first I just want to endorse what Chair Routh said. 100% agree that this street needs to be renamed. And what I'd like to do is to propose that the Planning Commission separate these issues and to recommend that the street now known as Cesar Chavez have that name removed. Secondly, I'd like the commission to recommend to City Council that there be an adequate process for reaching out to the community to talk about this issue, to solicit other ideas, if there are any, and to involve as many people as possible. My basic concern, and let me just speak to the sort of my framing of this, is that there is nothing more corrosive to the public trust than government ignoring its own rules about involving the public. And that is what the council committee is proposing to do here. And I think that's a mistake. And I think that's partly why we're hearing pretty diverse opinions about this particular issue. I'd like a process that provides meaningful opportunity for people to comment and participate. And I think a good, robust process helps to build support it doesn't delay it. And we shouldn't be afraid of having a decent process just because it's inconvenient or takes too much time or it's cumbersome or we don't want to hear the answer. So at the appropriate moment, Chair Routh, I'm going to make a motion to first rid ourselves of the Cesar Chavez name on that street, and secondly, recommend, and then a second motion to ask council to have a more complete process.
Okay. Great. Do we want to have a little bit of conversation before we go to a proposal? Is that okay, Commissioner Knowles?
Sure.
Okay, great. Vice Chair
That's why I put it out there.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
I guess I'm checking in on process. Is this an amendment proposal that we need a second, or are we having discussion and then you're going
I
to
think we're
bring
having,
something up
right now
afterwards?
it's a discussion. And then I'd love to, I think normally it has not been in past for those, we've had, for example, street vacations and other things that have gone through just consent agenda. There are some things that we have, like a briefing, a hearing, and a recommendation. We have done those all on the same day. Oftentimes, when we have had, our most recent processes have been pretty involved, including the CEI hub and others, so that we've had a long period of time. This is relatively new, recently put on our agenda. So I would, if it's okay, I'd propose like having a more free-flowing conversation, and then when folks feel moved. Does that sound okay?
Well, I'll go with the free-flowing conversation. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I was here during the renaming the last time. Washington, D.C. has a grid overlaid with the spoke and wheels. It's a way more complicated street system, so I am personally not concerned by, I think we could have more streets with names rather than numbers, and still get around. Okay, so that argument's not particularly compelling to me. I feel like the public outreach side, I think it's some good concerns. I'm assuming, I don't know this because I'm not a lawyer, but that the state law says it has to go through the Planning Commission. The state law doesn't say what process is required. So I'm sort of running the assumption that somehow when if this gets back to City Council, that they would do some retroactive decision on process, but I could be wrong on that. So that's my conciliatory understanding of how the process might play out. And I think that I do carry some weight from the last time this went through the process in the community, that we heard that I think that was a huge process, and that sometimes government needs to be creative and nimble to address unforeseen situations. And the potential of, I think there is a potential that a renaming process could not just be short, it could be very extensive. And in some ways, we elect our leadership of our city to make decisions like this. I suspect that many street namings would not happen if they were voted on by the public. I think sometimes we have to trust our elected leaders to do that, and they have accountability through elections. So my inclination is to support the recommendation staff proposed. I am a little bit with Commissioner Knowles. I think it's a good point about corrosiveness with the public. So I'm taking that into me, but I think that a recommendation to strike Cesar Chavez's name alone, that also would require a lot of public involvement. I think the public would support it, but erasing something without replacing it with something else is not a real outcome. So I think I'll just stop there. I was rambling as promised.
No, that's great. I promise to ramble as well. Yes, Commissioner Thompson.
I understand that there's some urgency here for obvious reasons, but I'm just trying to understand, like, from a timing standpoint. I believe we are being asked to make a recommendation today. Is there a reason why it needs to be today, or now that it's been like kicked back to Planning Commission, that we can't do more of the normal process and have noticing and have time to read testimony? I mean, I don't know about others, but the email, I had very little time during my workday to look at the testimony that came in at 9:30 a.m. I have not opened the email that was sent at 4:30 p.m. And the memo, the link doesn't work for me. So trying to pull up that memo, I just get like a, page not available type notice. I don't know if others had that issue. So I'm feeling a little bit like I'm being asked to recommend something I don't fully understand. And as Director Diefendorfer described, like what the Planning Commission is meant to do from an ordinance standpoint, it is to understand the issue at hand and make a recommendation based off the interest of the public within 6 miles of said street. And so I think that changing the name to Campesinos and removing Cesar Chavez quickly is a good idea, and I support that. But I feel a little odd that that we're being asked to do that without having the materials well enough in advance. So that's kind of where I'm at. That is also just a bunch of rambling, but there you have it.
Great. This is part of the process. Yeah.
Commissioner O'Mara, for the record, I want to appreciate everyone who's provided testimony, both written and in person, but also echo Commissioner Thompson's concerns with my ability to feel prepared to consider this. I have questions around implementation and budget impacts and where the cost of these improvements fall within the priorities of PBOT. And while I support the intention and all of the community effort that has gone into this, it is typical for us to have that type of information when we consider a meaningful recommendation. If you have that, I would love for you to come forward and help, but that's a significant piece of information I feel I'm missing.
Thanks so much, Millicent Williams, Director of the Portland Bureau of Transportation. While I would love to give you an exact number, I can give you an estimation about what it would cost in order to move the process forward in terms of implementation. We would need staff dedicated to the effort. It is a full-time job to go through the process of the engagement that would be necessary or the notification that would be necessary from the Bureau's perspective, as is outlined in the City Code 17.93.030, I believe. I have it pulled up right now. So there would be significant effort to ensure that appropriate notification for those who live along or on and in immediate adjacency to, as well as the intersecting streets and some blocks away from Cesar Chavez. We would need to make notification, do some outreach, and support community in that way. Additionally, we would need to change out the street signs. We do not have the street signs that said 39th Avenue. Those were disposed of 20 years ago when the street was renamed. Even if we had them, they would not be of the quality or standard that we would currently use when replacing a street sign. So those do not exist. And so that is not something that is an easy fix. The implementation process in terms of getting the signs printed and then mounted by PBOT staff along a 5.5 mile stretch would be significant. There are a number of intersections that we would need to consider. It would roughly, in my estimation, if we spent roughly $250,000 20 years ago, we would probably spend about $1 million this year or over the course of the next couple of years, because it probably would be a couple of year process. We would need to engage federal partners as well as state and county partners. We would need to work with ODOT to change the signs on the interstate, which from time to time to do that requires a full closure of a lane for a number of hours. So there would be a great deal of coordination that's required there. None of those things are impossible things to do, but they are a part of the things that we would need to consider. We would also have to work very closely with the Postmaster General to ensure that they were aware of the change And there is precedent for leaving street signs up, 2 signs, the old name and the new name, for a certain number of months. Again, we recognize that the code waiver has been proposed, and so it has been in the past 5 years that could be adjusted to as few as 6 months. It's actually what the city traffic engineer recommends as an alternative to that 5-year period, a 6-month period, which would give us enough time to do the back end work that's necessary. So that is a ballpark figure, recognizing staff time, both from the planning work that would need to happen to implement, the outreach work that would need to happen to implement, then the actual labor and the crews that would be assigned, the equipment that's necessary, the signs themselves. We would need to order those. We do not have a sign shop anymore in the Bureau, so we would need to work with our sign maker to get that done. And that process would not be without some level of effort. The Bureau would, however, if directed, identify the resources to be able to do so, and it would not come from other dedicated sources that we have, like the transportation utility fee, which was just recently passed, which we appreciate everyone's support for.
Thank you for that response. And I assume, given the significant planning, that this would not be a current budget year expense either. You would probably be projecting forward to the next fiscal year for the city budget, or perhaps even 2 years out. Just hearing you explain the logistics around the staffing, the planning, right? Trying to understand, is that $1 million needing to be solved for this city budget year, or would it likely be?
It probably would be solved over a couple of years, but that does not mean that the work would not need to start fairly soon. And there are some opportunities that we have to look at our overall budget, again, in a resource-constrained environment. That does present its challenges, but the staff has already begun to look at what our options might be, because we don't know that there would be the opportunity for us to wait for another fiscal year, especially since this one hasn't even gotten started yet. We're excited, though. So we anticipate that we would need several months to get ready, which means we would be smack dab in the middle of this upcoming fiscal year, and then over the course of probably 2 fiscal years.
Thank you.
I have a question. Well, thank you, Director
Absolutely.
Lee, by the way, for being here.
It's my pleasure.
I know sometimes I have seen your day start before 4.
It's my pleasure to serve, Commissioner.
Well, thank you very much. I think also recently, I'm curious what the most recent street naming that I can remember was Harvey Milk.
No.
Was that? I mean, that I can remember.
Yes.
It is not the most recent. That has. I'm curious. What process? I don't remember. Was there a long process for that?
Yes.
What did that look like?
That was a multi-year process as well, and that renaming happened about 6 years ago when we changed Stark, a portion of Stark, to Harvey Milk. The most recent street renaming was to rename 3 blocks of Southwest Jackson to Itway Rose Hill. That's near PSU, which is right around the corner. That process is not yet complete and has taken, to date, 2 years to get to the point of actually moving some of the bigger pieces forward. That was just approved at council a couple of months ago. Just prior to that, or not just prior to that, we did a significant street renaming process for for South Portland when we established a new sextant. I know we still like to use quadrants, but there are 6 of them. So we have a new sextant when we got rid of the leading zeros to ensure wayfinding was easier for those who needed to have emergency responders coming to their home. So South Portland was, many of those streets were renamed in that process, and that also took a couple of years.
Thank you. Any other questions before we bless and release?
Just a clarifying question of the memo and the resolution, which states that 17.93.10 through 17.93050 would be waived. So we are not looking at the city-initiated action to rename a city street, which is the 17.93050. That's how I'm reading that, but that comes from the city administrator.
Commissioner, I'm just taking a quick look. I do see that 050 is city-initiated renaming. I don't believe that this is
That's not
a
what this-
city-initiated, even though I'm
Right.
just looking at the memo, and I guess we're citing the city council ordinance. It does say through 050, which would sort of
Would
indicate that the city initiated process is a part of this. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not. I believe that this is, I mean, I guess on some level, it is being introduced by the city council, right? If we just go back to the
But
the roots of
050
this.
speaks to the city administrator,
Yeah.
which this was not.
Yes, right.
Thank you.
So it was introduced by city council, but not the city administrator.
So the potential may be that we need to revisit this with city council to make sure that the designations of which parts of code are specifically referenced are accurate.
Yeah, I think that there could have been an error in that citation, potentially. But I think that if one were to look at those sections of the code, it outlines, and I think Commissioner Thompson, you had mentioned something about the process as outlined in the code and how that may or may not be different from the state. And so what the state's is pretty straightforward. It talks about notification. It talks about the 6 mile, that the commission's role is to determine whether it's in the best for the city in the 6 mile area. The city's code has more involved processes, I'll say that. And so that's what the ordinance is intending to waive.
Yeah. Vice Chair Spivak.
So that's actually, I was just looking at that. So the state law doesn't have any outreach requirements on this body, but it does have outreach requirements on the city council to notify through a newspaper that goes out to people in the 6 mile radius of the street.
No, I don't.
At least that's what I'm looking at in ORS 227.120. It says that upon receiving such recommendation, the city council shall afford persons particularly interested in the general public an opportunity to be heard at a time and place to be specified in a notice of hearing published in a newspaper of general circulation within the municipality and the 6 mile area, not less than once within the week prior to the week within which the hearing is to be held. And that's referring to the city council hearing. So I assume city council would follow that, right? Because they can't waive the state law.
So Commissioner Spivak, Vice Chair Spivak, I'll just offer that because this notification is a notice of a hearing published in a newspaper of general circulation, that notification in a publication in a newspaper is a general part of the notification. It's not directed, I guess I'm just distinguishing that it's not directed at notifying people who actually live along the corridor. So
Right, I understand that.
putting an ad in the paper is a normal part of, we as for the Planning Commission, we put an ad in the DJC, for example. It's just standard part of notification, and that's all that the state statute is requiring, essentially, of the city council. And that is probably done as a matter of course with city council agendas.
Okay. And does it matter if the planning commission makes a recommendation, does it matter what the recommendation says to city council? Does the recommendation need to, if the city council is going to take up renaming to Campesinos, does that need to follow a recommendation from this body to rename it Campesinos? Or could we have a recommendation and the council just goes a different direction because that's what the public input influences them to do?
I would say that, like with any recommendation of the Planning Commission, it is a recommendation, and the city council ultimately has the final decision-making authority. So I would say that in many respects, this is no different than that.
Great questions. Other questions?
For the next, after Planning Commission recommendation and advances to council, there will be an opportunity for additional public comment before council and written comment.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
I heard wasn't sure if I heard a question previously from you, Commissioner O'Mara, of like basically if we give a few weeks to consider this, does that cause, like, what are the repercussions of that? Is there a specific urgency? Was that a question that I heard?
I think that was Commissioner Thompson's.
Yeah, I
but
mean, I was just about
echoing.
to circle back to that and just like if we kept testimony open so that it seems like there was a lot of late testimony continuing to come in, reiterating, I haven't read all of that. If we extended the testimony window and did more noticing so that people knew that this was planning commission, because it sounded like from some testifiers today that wasn't made very clear, without extending the process into years, but just trying to provide some sort of sound process where we can and keep things moving at the same time. What are the thoughts on that?
Commissioners, I think we have the council representative here. We'll ask you to.
Yes, I
provide
can
that.
just speak to the urgency that we're moving with. Like Shelley shared, we worked closely with community members, with Por La Casa, and we wanted to avoid a lot of the pain that they went through with the previous process, which is why we waived a lot of the requirements and tried to swiftly move it through council. And we wanted to use the committee as an opportunity for public input. And then once it goes back to council, there will be another opportunity for public input. And we saw that as sufficient to get public input on what council should do. And we saw the planning commission as another opportunity for public input.
But you didn't intend on bringing it to planning commission when you took it to the committee, right? Wasn't that
Well,
not the
as
intent?
Director Williams shared, we got to committee before we learned from the city attorneys that there was a requirement to come to the planning commission, because this is our first time going through the process as well. So once it was already scheduled to go to committee before the city attorneys flagged that, hey, we need to come to the planning commission before we proceed. So and then we paused, came to the planning commission, and now we're here.
And if I may, that's why it was pulled from the general agenda, city council agenda, because the process had not come through the planning commission.
Elijah, may I ask you to stay here while because Commissioner Knowles, you might.
Yeah, no problem.
Be illustrative. Commissioner Knowles.
Sure. So let me just suggest a path forward here. First, I think it would be great if the commission were willing to take a position that the Cesar Chavez name should be removed. I fully endorse that, and I suspect everybody else on the commission does too. And secondly, whether we wanted to or not, it may be that the planning commission is becoming the forum for which public involvement is going to happen, and we have an opportunity to at least improve our notification to the public about the proposed name change. And I think Campesinos is a great name, but there may be other ideas out there, and there's certainly people who don't agree with me. I think we have an obligation to hear from those folks in a way that we haven't been able to now, particularly with this late arriving testimony. And I would have some ideas about how we can make a more complete process, but perhaps the path forward is to make a definitive statement about the name Cesar Chavez. And secondly, defer our consideration of the process and the name, substitute name, until a meeting, and between now and then, a future meeting, and between now and then, folks can have a chance to review the existing testimony and to receive additional testimony. So I guess what I will do at this point is I will move that the commission recommend to the city council that the name Cesar Chavez be removed from the street currently known as Cesar Chavez.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Okay. Thank you very much. Discussion?
I would like to ask Director Williams, keep putting you on the spot. Thank you for being here. I'm assuming by Planning Commission, if we approve this, it does not trigger any immediate removal action and work by PBOT, that it will continue to go through a process, because what I do not want to create is a bifurcated process for PBOT, and just appreciate everything you need to go through for implementation. So would you say that's correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
From a process standpoint, I'm a little confused about how this proposal works. Like, I think that typically with a normal project or plan, there is a recommendation, and the Planning Commission can either vote to recommend it as proposed, and then it goes on to City Council. They hear testimony, amend it as they will. We ourselves vote to amend it and pass that amendment, that amended recommendation forth to City Council, or we vote to not recommend it. And so the question there is, if Planning Commission votes to not recommend this, does that mean the street renaming does not move forward? And secondly, like David, with your proposal, I don't know how removing a name is an amendment of the proposal that is before us, and how we can just remove something and not propose putting something back.
So that's a great question. I mean, just comment on that. I mean, this is, as you know, Chair Rouse said at the beginning, this is not the usual process for us. So this is not in a land use context. This isn't within our authority as a planning commission. Typically, we do get the recommendation from the staff. In this case, I think I'm interpreting this as we pretty much have an open field to run on, and we can make whatever recommendation we want to the city council, and the council, of course, is free to accept that or ignore it. What I thought would be helpful in this meeting is at least to make it clear, yes, we want to change the name, but we need some additional time to consider public testimony, both around the name and about the process.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Brandon. Oh, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Spivak.
It's been really helpful listening to my fellow commissioners on this one. Where I'm sitting right now is that City Council, a committee of City Council has asked us to waive our standard process we would apply to a project like this. It was not a full City Council decision. It was a decision of 5 people on a committee. And my instinctive response is that if you're going to ask us to waive our process, then you might not get back what you think you're going to get back from it. And all I've heard from the planning, which I was able to sort of read the testimony came in, was what Commissioner Knowles said. Let's drop Cesar Chavez from the name. And perhaps by asking us to have a insufficient process that we would not normally do, typically it takes a full city council to change our process rules, then they might not get, then that might be all they get from us. And then it will be up to them to own having, at city council level, a much fuller process for taking public feedback. The other approach, which Commissioner Knowles has pitched, is that be our body to take the, or Commissioner Thompson, I think, just sort of say, let's hold it more time in this body to get a full public outreach process. I have a little concern that in terms of the amount of time it takes for the public to weigh in on this issue. If they need to mobilize, organize, testify to us, and then do it again at city council, that's a lot of work to put on the public. So I recognize that this isn't an ideal scenario, but I would rather the public mobilize once on this issue rather than twice. So in some ways, if the planning commission kind of punts, then city council would have to own that they're the ones holding that process. And I think that's the end of my thought there. So I guess my feelings are evolving, I can tell, but I'm now more inclined to go with Commissioner Knowles' recommendation of providing the clear feedback we did get from the testimony we did hear to change the name, and then let the city council have it back at that point to carry out a more robust process.
Commissioner Humes?
I think the thing I'm struggling with is, why do we seek public feedback? And it's to get the public's feedback. And when I see that, 92.8% of respondents feel a certain way, for me, it's hard to ignore a little bit, because I think somebody commented that 93% of Portlanders literally do not agree on pretty much any topic, I think. And that's why we like to live here, because, we can have a conversation, we can disagree. And, but I think that's the thing that is standing out to me, that, there is just so much feedback in one direction, and to just kind of completely ignore that is kind of what I'm struggling with, I guess.
Okay, Commissioner Brannon.
I think this just didn't go through a typical process. Street naming have 2,500 signatures. We have processes in place because it's sometimes standard, it comes up, we're used to it. This is not typical. So we do need to be flexible, but in the same breath, this entity has ignored public comment before, so the numbers are not really something I'm thinking matter at this point, unless you keep it open and we get enough public comment from both sides, because usually the folks who provide comments are not always those who are most impacted or live in that area or see any of those impacts. I'll just state that Portland has less than 6 streets that are named after people of color, and it's interesting that the last couple that have gone through the process, Martin Luther King Jr., have had a pretty difficult experience. So re-traumatizing people to go through that again and face that same fight doesn't make a lot of sense. But I'm also someone who sees we have this process in place. It wasn't brought to us properly, so we could start the process over in that right way. I'm kind of seeing where Commissioner Spivak is going with that, but this is an AI data pool. That's not even accurate as of 4 p.m., so it doesn't mean a whole lot. When there's a lot of public input who didn't know this was coming, weren't following council agendas, didn't get a chance to provide input. So I think my recommendation would be to keep the public comment open a little longer so that community organizations, besides some of the local leaders who care about this a lot from the past, and are still very influential and can mobilize their communities to respond in the same way, have that opportunity. But at least we have an agreement that we don't want to name it Cesar Chavez.
Right.
Would you, can I ask, would you advocate for us to keep this process here, or to move it on to city council with yes, it needs to be renamed? Yeah.
That one is tricky.
Yeah, it is. I would, if I may, because I've not shared, and it's starting to feel cowardly. I remember the process too in 2009. It was a really long process. I remember hearing from friends some of the comments that they had to endure in that, and that was. It shouldn't be shocking, but it was. And I do feel that there are extenuating circumstances in this. How extenuating circumstances as a point of process we identify as criteria going forward, rather than this feels shocking. I don't know, and so that is a question I'm holding. I feel that Campesinos is the spirit holds the spirit of the previous process. While not the letter, it is the spirit. I understand that going from the letter to a spirit is going to be $1 million that we don't necessarily have as a city, but that we would want to remove it, like what we move it to is agnostic in terms of that cost. I also want to honor, and I appreciate Commissioner Knowles bringing this up, and other colleagues that what I'm hearing, I don't know if this is how it's translating in my mind. We absolutely don't want this to be a precedent. But also, given the extenuating circumstances of this, I do think that this is, to me, this feels different. It feels more of a, it feels aligned with 2009. And also, I'm looking at, I understand that there's, a lot of individual testimony. I'm also looking at there was a very long list of organizations and community members that represent a lot of people, and the list is long. And when I look at this list, there's a really strong overlap of those who are actively organizing on different fronts to defend democracy and defend our vulnerable communities to federal attacks. So I think that there's a lot going on here. It does, I don't know if other people feel it's messy. It is messy to me. And that is the world we are living in right now. So again, I really want to appreciate, now I'm rambling more than anyone else. So you can all feel eloquent by comparison, but that's what has been going through my heart. I want to, Commissioner Brennan and then Commissioner Alvarado.
And then I also want to say that this wasn't just recommended by council. We had the implementation arm recommending this change. And that says a lot, because I remember being in the city and being really frustrated when political leaders would make recommendations and not see how it would impact the people who do the work. And so I want to take gratitude for the recommendation we received from the director. And if that is a recommendation that she still stands by as of 6 p.m. and hearing multiple comments and such, I would defer to that personally.
I don't know that I made a recommendation. I'm sorry. I spoke to
The
what.
TM, or the memo, the letter that was received.
That was what the council clerk prepared. I just read the recommendation that was brought forward by city council. So that was not the Bureau's recommendation, it was the Bureau's direction. And as this process has continued to evolve, literally as we're talking, even as we were preparing for this session, the question was who should provide the framework or the framing for the conversation. And I was asked to present the information from, frankly, and hopefully an agnostic perspective as the implementer of what would be proposed. But that is not the Bureau's recommendation. The Bureau's recommendation is to do what the Bureau is directed to do, and to do so with care and with compassion and with professionalism. And that's what we are prepared to do. I can speak to the practicalities of changing the name multiple times. Or the impracticality of changing a name multiple times. I can speak to the impracticality of how leaving something in a way that is offensive to many impacts community. And that's me speaking as Millicent Williams. That's not me speaking as director of the Portland Bureau of Transportation. As you know, I experience a lot of conversations and concerns coming to my office and to my desk from communities who felt like the transportation enterprise, which this could be considered a part of, a street renaming, a street name, has caused harm. And our goal as the transportation entity, the Transportation Bureau, is to ensure that we are not perpetuating harm caused to community. That said, this is something that we do not have an opinion to offer, but we have recommendations about how to implement so that it is fair, so that it is equitable, and so that to the extent that we're following the letter and the spirit of the law, we are able to do that with care and compassion. The code is clear. The recommendation from City Council was also very clear in that they've asked that we waive all of the process. This part of the process was a part that we were unaware, or that council was unaware, was a part of the process. And so that was why it was pulled back, to give this process the opportunity to play out. What this body does and how that informs what the full City Council will do is not something that I am equipped to nor able to speak to, but I can share that your opinions and those of folks who've written in, who've called in, who've testified both at City Council and here today, and who probably will testify at City Council in the upcoming hearing or session, will have some bearing on what City Council does. The committee is 5 people. City Council is 12 people. So there are decisions that will need to be made, and there is direction that we will be given, and that is direction that we will take. And we will, again, do so with care, with compassion, with professionalism.
Thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Alvarado.
Yeah, around 10 a.m. I was like, it makes sense. Let's just rename it 30, the number. It makes a lot of sense. And then later on that day, I had different feelings. And that just tells me that there's not enough time to weigh in on something like this as a person who has limited context and just doesn't have that history. And so I think just feeling that uncertainty and uneasiness about just having this weight of this thing land on the Planning Commission, in the way that it did, I just don't think it's a fair thing. And I think that we can that I feel like comfortable just saying, yes, let's move forward, let's not move forward. And so I really, I'm leaning towards, yes, let's accept this name needs to change at whatever point that happens, it will happen. That'll be a recommendation. And I'm also comfortable with saying, hey, City Council, do the right process. But here, I wouldn't feel comfortable making a recommendation as of today, saying, yes, let's make this, because I've not been able to really chew on this. So I would feel like I'd be would want to have more time on this if I was to make a recommendation, or push it to City Council and have them do the engagement. That's how I'm feeling currently.
And the proper process would be it would come back to us. No? After signatures and outreach and all that.
I think, again, this is complicated. I apologize. There's a process outlined in Title 17 of the code. It has everything from assembling a historian panel. It has many different components to it. Coming to the Planning Commission is one part of that process that is, I would say, more part of the legislative part of that process. After certain things have happened, I was just reviewing the code really quickly, and it talks about this historian panel, and that the historian panel actually makes a recommendation to the Planning Commission, and that's how the Planning Commission gets information about the historic significance and is then able to make the recommendation. I think we're just in this very difficult situation where I think it's been expressed what the reason is for waiving parts of the process. The part of the process that requires this street renaming coming to the Planning Commission is in state statute. Therefore, the City Council couldn't waive it, and that's why it is here before you today. I think where you go from here. If this were to go back to council with a recommendation to do more outreach, I'm not honestly sure. I think we'd have to consult city attorneys. I think that this hearing would fulfill the obligation to have the Planning Commission have a role. And so I think then it would be back in the hands of the City Council for them to decide what the process is next. If I might, if this is helpful, I don't know if it's helpful, but if we were to set aside this particular topic for a moment, this particular issue, the normal process, legislative process would be, it would require a resolution of the full council to express a direction so that when something comes to Planning Commission, if Planning Commission denies it, that's the only way it would be able to move forward to the full council. So let me try to say that a different way. Typically, if something's not, if there was no resolution from council for, to direct the city to do something, the city bureau to do something, if it's something that comes from staff and it's brought to you, if you do not recommend approval of that item to city council, it would not proceed to city council. However, if there's a resolution of city council directing that thing to happen, then if the topic comes to Planning Commission and Planning Commission does not recommend denial, recommends denial, it would still move forward to city council and they would still have the ability to take action on that, if that's helpful.
I'm sorry, I didn't totally understand that. A lot of people are nodding. Can someone clarify? If we continue this to next meeting, would city council be stuck, or would city council be able to proceed? I thought city council would be stuck in that situation, and I'm actually not proposing that, but that's my question.
I think they can proceed.
Even if we don't give any recommendation at all?
I think we have Councilor Smith on who has her hand raised.
So let me just suggest, I believe, as I read the state statute, by having this discussion, we're satisfying the requirements of the ORS statute in question. And it's the only reason it ended up in front of us. If we approve the motion I made, where we are making a recommendation regarding the street, whether or not we proceed to do more in terms of a recommendation, including more outreach to or more public comment to the commission, or we just leave it at that, we will fulfilled our obligation under the statute. And city council, as Commissioner Spivak was suggesting, can decide what they want to do process-wise. That's just my take on it.
This is not the right way to handle this, because we should have I'm reading this, it says, upon receiving such recommendation, the council shall. It says receiving a recommendation. Based on my read of the state statute, which is maybe different, if we just tabled it, that would be our power play. They don't have a recommendation at all. I'm not recommending that process, but I'm trying to understand what the rules are of this. Did you understand something differently? I'm trying to,
I am more confused now than I was when I was nodding my head a few minutes ago.
Okay, I want to acknowledge Councilor Loretta Smith has entered the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for deliberating over this. This is very complicated, but when we learned from the city attorney that we had a responsibility to come to you before, we did not know that because this is the first time that we've done it. We went through a public process to pass it through the committee. That was one public process, but Commissioner Knowles is absolutely right. What the city attorney told us was that we needed to come here, and that was something that we had to do, and it didn't make a difference whether you approved it or not. We had to meet that ORS, and if the city council wanted to take it further, that we could. And so for me, what my plan is as the person who brought it forward with Tiffany Payoma Lane and with Councilor Novick, and it passed through our Public Works Committee. We plan to put it forward to the big council and have the council have a big, robust community process. And we're going to do that process, and then we'll put a resolution, not a resolution, but we'll put this ordinance forward and have the entire council vote on that. And that was the plan. And just so that you know, if you feel a little bit more comfortable, in 2009, I don't know if you were here, Director Williams, but when they changed the Portland Boulevard to Rosa Parks, they did not go through the Planning Commission. And that was something that the city attorneys had said to me, said you can go that route and you can go forward to the city council, but we did not want to do that. We wanted to follow the rules and we wanted to make sure that we were following the ORS. And I think that bringing this to you tonight is following those rules. They didn't have any specifics under that ORS that required us to have a yes or a no, but we had to come before you. Yeah. And I think this is meeting the requirement. But if you feel like you want to do more additional, but just know that we are also going to do an additional public process before during the city council process to put the ordinance forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for being here, Councilor Loretta Smith. And while we are naming folks who want to honor, we have former Commissioner Carmen Rubio in the place. So thank you very much for being here as well. And other thoughts? My understanding, or my thought is that I appreciate Commissioner Knoll's suggestion to, say Cesar Chavez. We need to rename it, and beyond that, to have, especially to allow City Council's process to be that, and to also say like, let's not do this again in this way. Other thoughts that people would like to share before are we ready to move to a vote? Yes.
I also think, I think part of this is for the hearing to happen and for that to be on the record. And so I think that was an important process for us to have here, and that would be on the record for the for City Council to do with what they will. So I think that I do see value in that.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Alvarado. Commissioner Brennan.
And then this will have a transmittal letter as usual. So then in it, we can make the referral to do the public engagement process that a counselor said that she would do.
The drafting of that is going to be exciting. Other thoughts?
Is that a motion?
We have a motion and a second. We've had robust discussion. Does everyone feel that they have shared what they need to share and are informed and understand the?
Could you please restate the motion? Sorry. The thing you just said was the motion?
I believe, Commissioner Knowles, do you want to restate or would you like to?
That's not how I understood Commissioner Knowles' motion. That's why
I'm sorry?
checking. Yeah, can we check is that a good summary?
Well, I don't know which summary you're relying on at this point. Okay, so my motion was that the Planning Commission recommend to Council that the name Cesar Chavez Boulevard be removed from the street currently known as Cesar Chavez Boulevard, period. That leaves open the next step in the process. It sounds like there is additional input contemplated, and we may be able to transmit this recommendation along with a transmittal letter that has some commentary that reflects what all of my colleagues here today have said.
Thank you. That helps. I was remembering some prior comments you made, so I support that, and thanks for clarifying.
Does anyone else have anything else that is clarifying that they wish other commissioners to know before we proceed? Okay. Autumn, could you please call the roll?
This is a vote for the Knowles amendment. Commissioner Alvarado.
Yes.
Commissioner Ames.
Yes.
Commissioner Brannan.
Yes.
Commissioner Knowles.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Mara. Yes. Vice Chair Pollak.
Yes.
Vice Chair Spivak.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Aye.
and Chair Routh.
Aye.
The amendment passes with 9 votes.
Okay. Great.
The motion as amended passes with 9 votes. Thank you.
Okay. Do we, any more business on this before we go to transmit a letter?
I have a question for
Aye.
process.
Yeah.
Do we just amend staff's proposal, or did we just, that's our full recommendation going to city council?
If I may, I think that maybe
Full
that
recommendation.
is the recommendation of this
Yeah.
body. It's not really an amendment, maybe to clarify that for the record. The recommendation of this body,
I like that clarification.
Yes.
Yeah, is that consistent with people's understanding that this is our full recommendation to city council? Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that clarification. I would love to, Director Williams, Elijah, thank you so much for your, please allow us to bless and release you to the rest of your evening. Thank you very much for being here. How do folks feel since we are you Jackie? Thank you very much we have one more hearing, and Jackie, you've been amazing. Thank you for waiting. I would love to suggest that we, would it be acceptable if I take a pass at a transmittal draft, given the time that we have spent and to honor? Okay. Can we take a few minutes to just reset? Okay, 7:05? We good? Jackie, is that okay? Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much.
To catch this moment.
Okay, team, we're coming back. Okay. Here we are, a mere hour and 7 minutes over time. Thank you, Shannon and Morgan, for your continued forbearance of us. We're jumping straight into our second, and I think probably final agenda item of the evening, which is the State Land Use Compliance Project. This is a briefing, a hearing, and hopefully a recommendation, because we have a state to comply with, correct? Our friends Shannon Buno and Margaret Tracy are here to take us wherever you would will us to go.
That's great, thank you. And I think their last conversation was a good primer. Is that better? I think your last conversation was a good primer for this presentation in terms of trying to understand the implications of state law and all the nuances about it. Anyways, I'm Morgan Tracy, Senior Planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and Project Manager for the State Land Use Compliance Project. And with me is Shannon Buno, Senior Planner and our esteemed Code Editor. I'm going to provide an overview and context for the state legislation included in the project scope, review each of the 13 proposals, we'll cover the project timeline, open it up for questions from the Commission, and then hand it over to you to open the public hearing. Before we get to our proposals, I wanted to start by giving an overview of recent state legislation and then zoom in on the 5 bills we're tackling with this project. This overview is important to put the proposals into context and that this project has a narrow compliance-focused scope. So, housing production has been at the forefront of the state's legislative agenda really since 2019, and we have undertaken a number of projects and process improvements to keep up. These changes expand the types of housing that is allowed, reduce the required process or cost drivers, and create new tools for home ownership. We see this interest continue in the last couple of legislative sessions. A number of these bills don't directly impact zoning regulations, while we are already in conformance with others. The 5 items in bold on this slide are the subject of this project and are necessary to bring the city's zoning rules into conformance with the recent state legislation. The first of these is House Bill 2138. This bill modifies a number of provisions related to middle housing and middle housing land divisions. Not all of these require a zoning code fix. For example, the city already complies with the limits on exactions and traffic studies. Also, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions are not enforced by the city, but it's still interesting to note that the state has essentially avoided these private limitations. Senate Bill 974 limits the amount of public process a residential upzone or plan development may have by limiting the notice area and comment period and removing the public hearing. House Bill 4037 pertains to applications reviewed through clear and objective standards. So these are not the more discretionary things like conditional uses, design, or environmental review. Clear and objective reviews are things like building permits. In these cases, they're not required to send notice for these reviews, but if they do, for this bill, the notice would be limited in area, there can be no hearing, and the applicant is the only one who can appeal the decision. These last 2 bills are about when certain uses must be allowed. House Bill 2005 expands where mental health treatment facilities must be allowed by right. And Senate Bill 1561 specifies that any dwelling that's destroyed by natural causes may be rebuilt regardless of whether it is non-conforming to development standards, density, or allowed uses. Okay, so that's just a little foundation.
And while we're between foundation, I missed a step. Are there any disclosures from commissioners? We all live in the state of Oregon. Okay, great. Vice Chair Speaker.
I own one residential property with homes on it that could use one of these provisions. But the city has to do it anyway. So I don't think that means and I was involved in lobbying the state for some of these bills, but also that's, I think I can still participate. Thanks.
Great. Any others? Sorry, thank you, Morgan, please.
Thank you.
While we're talking about messiness of process,
Yeah.
I did this to us.
All right, moving on. So the project contains 13 proposals. They are separated into these 3 categories: middle housing regulations, review procedures, and allowed uses. It's worth noting that while there may be other development standards or processes that might also be improved to facilitate implementation of the project, these changes would necessitate more analysis, community engagement, and deliberation before recommending a course of action. We had a fairly full conversation about process before. So typically, our projects will include a discussion draft phase for these conversations and test proposals, but given the impending deadline for compliance, that more comprehensive review was not possible. So necessarily, this project scope is focused on those compliance related matters. Category 1 has 6 proposals that primarily respond to House Bill 2138 and address mental housing. So Proposal 1, currently we allow duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes in their more conventional form. That is, all the units are together in one structure, like the fourplex on the top left corner of the image on the right. The state now requires that cities allow any configuration of attached or detached units for these plexes. So for Portland, that means expanding the allowed housing types in the single dwelling zones to include multi-dwelling development, so that a fourplex could be a pair of duplexes, a triplex plus a house, or 4 detached houses. This adds flexibility, for example, to build around existing development. Say there was an existing house on a lot, you could add more units to that lot in either attached or detached fashions. Similar flexibility is also added for cottage units, which previously had to all be detached, but will now allow up to 4 units to be in one structure, like the image on the left. In addition to expanding the configurations of middle housing that's allowed, the bill also expands where middle housing must be allowed. In Portland, we permit most middle housing in all zones that allow residential development. Almost. However, this change means that cottage clusters, which had previously been excluded from the low density R20 zone due to infrastructure challenges, and from the higher density RM2 through RX multi-dwelling zones due to the impracticalities of achieving the required minimum densities, will now be allowed in these zones. This does not mean that they are necessarily any more feasible, just that they are allowed in cases where the builder can make it work. Similarly, middle housing lot size minimums that are different than a single house are being removed. Again, this may create challenges for site layout and frustration for applicants that propose a mismatch between the housing type and lot size, but it's required by the bill. The constrained sites Z overlay will continue to limit middle housing to duplexes in areas of natural hazards and resources, and there are no changes needed or proposed to that overlay. The third proposal limits the application of development standards to new middle housing units. So in some cases, when units are added to a site with a house, for example, when converting a site to a cottage cluster, some development standards may require alterations to the structure or adjustments to meet the middle housing standards. For example, if an existing house was set back from the street and did not face the common area in this cottage cluster example, then the front door would need to be moved or an adjustment approved. These changes ensure that existing non-conforming elements of a structure will not need to be altered as a result of converting a site to middle housing. The fourth proposal responds to House Bill 2138 requirements to add new bonuses for middle housing and consequently adjust some bonuses that we already had. The bill requires cities to offer up 2 extra units on a site when bonuses for affordability and/or accessibility are used. For the first affordability bonus, the current code includes a bonus floor area for 1 unit at 60% median family income. The second bonus is called the deeper affordability bonus, and currently it requires half of the units to be affordable at 60% MFI. In this case, 2 extra units are granted and extra FAR is awarded. This is also known as the sixplex bonus. Now, since only 1 affordable unit is needed to qualify for an extra unit per the bill, we modified the deeper affordability bonus and changed the regular affordable unit FAR bonus to leverage the Housing Bureau's Home Buyer Opportunity Limited Tax Exemption, or HOLT program, for 100% MFI ownership units. For the accessibility bonus, House Bill 2138 requires allowing a bonus unit for a Type A dwelling unit. This slide compares differences between a Type A unit, more accessible for folks with mobility devices, a Type B unit, which is designed to be adaptable and modifiable, and visitable units, a unique Portland standard that provides the opportunity for folks with mobility impairments to visit a home, but not necessarily live there. Type A units require that all parts of the unit are accessible. So for a two-story townhouse, a lift or elevator would be needed. In Type B townhouse units, only one floor must be accessible, but it must contain a full bathroom, a bedroom, and a kitchen. The visitable units only require a half bath on the ground floor. So for the accessibility bonus, this proposal includes both a Type A unit bonus as required by the bill, as well as a Type B unit bonus. The Type A bonus earns extra FAR, building coverage, and an extra unit, while the Type B bonus offers another option to earn added building coverage and floor area intended to accommodate the ground floor bedroom and a full bath. Due to the inconsistencies between the Type A, Type B requirements and the visitability standard that currently exists in the zoning code, and the fact that they originate from separate codes, the visitability requirement is being deleted from the zoning code. The fifth and sixth proposals are related to middle housing land divisions. So the previous state rules adopted in 2019, the previous state rules adopted in 2019 required that utility services be separately provided to each dwelling unit. This is inefficient and creates challenges when trying to add all those laterals to the public system. House Bill 2138 enables cities to allow shared utilities to serve these lots. Water service will continue to be provided separately, as this is how utility billing accounts are set up for each dwelling. The sixth proposal addresses an issue that affects existing duplexes and accessory dwelling units as part of a middle housing land division. Another requirement of the middle housing enabling legislation was that each lot in the MHLD middle housing land division may contain just one dwelling unit, and that only middle housing was allowed. This is a problem for houses that already have ADUs, as ADUs are not defined as a middle housing type. This also presented problems for existing duplexes that were stacked or did not have firewall separation. Unless those structures were altered to remove a dwelling unit, they could not be part of a middle housing land division. This change fixes that by allowing an existing house with an ADU or duplex to occupy a single middle housing lot. So you're almost halfway there. That concludes category one, and I'll turn it over to Shannon to describe the remaining proposals.
Thanks, Morgan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shannon Buno. I'm a senior planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We're going to move on to the 5 proposals related to land use review procedures included in category 2. House Bill 2138 requires cities to allow a middle housing land division plat to be recorded before, at the same time as, or after the development is built. Currently, building permits for middle housing are reviewed at the same time as the middle housing land division is being reviewed. Proposal 7 includes amendments that allow the middle housing land division plat to be finalized and recorded before development starts. But allowing construction to start after the middle housing land division has been recorded may result in the need to adjust lot lines or the location of easements after the development is complete. So to address this, we are also amending the replat process to allow replatting middle housing land division. This will avoid serial property line adjustments. House Bill 2138 also requires that cities allow regular land divisions to be processed concurrently with middle housing land divisions. Several amendments carry out this requirement, including an amendment that facilitates dividing a larger lot into multiple lots for cottage clusters. That amendment allows minimum lot density in single dwelling zones to be met by proposing a minimum required number of dwelling units rather than lots. And House Bill 4037 includes a technical fix that allows us to align the expiration periods for land divisions and middle housing land divisions, which are currently not aligned. And this presents issues for concurrent reviews. House Bill 2138 and 4037 and Senate Bill 974 all have provisions that affect the steps taken during a land use review process. Proposals 9 through 11 address these bills by eliminating the preliminary notice and local appeal steps of an expedited land division, reduces notice area and comment period, and reassigns certain land use reviews that involve housing. The most significant effect of these amendments reduces the comment period for a Type 2 review from 21 days to 14 days. The bulk of reviews in the city are type 2 land use reviews. Other changes include removing notice and the option for a local appeal for middle housing land divisions, which mostly use the expedited land division process, and the reassignment of residential zone changes and planned developments to a type 2X procedure. All right, moving on to category 3, which relates to allowed housing. House Bill 2005 requires cities to allow residential treatment homes and residential treatment facilities without requiring a land use review in all residential, commercial, and employment zones. Amendments in this proposal make it clear that residential treatment homes, which have fewer than 6 residents, and residential treatment facilities, which have 6 or more residents, are group living use, sorry. Residential treatment homes are household living, and residential treatment facilities are group living. And the amendments ensure that both types of facility are allowed without a conditional use review. Senate Bill 1561 requires cities to allow dwelling units that are destroyed by natural causes to be replaced within a certain time frame. The bill was passed in response to the 2020 wildfires. The zoning code already allows dwelling units to be replaced in zones where residential uses are allowed. However, in industrial zones where residential uses are prohibited, replacement of a dwelling unit is not always allowed. This proposal amends the non-conforming use regulations to always allow dwelling units to be replaced as long as they are replaced within 5 years. All right, well, we do have some technical amendments to propose here. Since the publication of the proposed draft, we have identified 2 additional technical amendments that are necessary. The technical amendments are detailed in the staff memo dated June 18, 2026, which has been posted on the project website. The first amendment deletes the visibility standard from the ADU chapter. As Morgan mentioned, the introduction of accessibility bonuses in the base zone, the visibility standards create conflicting and inconsistent rules pertaining to accessibility. So the project proposes to delete visibility standards from the code. However, we accidentally missed the visibility standard in the ADU chapter, and this technical amendment addresses that omission. The second amendment removes language in Chapter 33, 730 that specifies steps for a local appeal of an expedited land division. House Bill 2138 precludes governments from holding a local appeal on an expedited land division. I mentioned this as Proposal 9. However, we inadvertently missed deleting some of the appeal steps in the code, so the second technical amendment corrects that. So that's the end of the presentation. So circling back to the staff proposal, we propose that the Planning Commission recommend that City Council adopt the State Land Use Compliance Project Report and amend Title 33 as shown in the proposed draft with the additional changes shown in the June 18 staff memo. And finally, our timeline. As this is a compliance project with impending deadlines, we are on a fast track to get these changes adopted by January 1st. After the conclusion of this hearing, the Commission will make its recommendation, which we will prepare into the recommended draft with accompanying ordinance and findings. We expect to start the City Council process in the fall in time for a January 1 effective date. Thank you.
There was a, thank you both so much. There was I believe that there was a request by staff to consider and move the technical amendments before oral testimony so that could be, those could be considered as part of it. Do folks feel comfortable with that? And would any brave soul like to so move those technical amendments?
So moved.
All right.
I'll second.
All right, and Alvarado second. Shall we call the roll?
All right, Chair, this is a matter of a procedural point. I don't think you have to vote on it yet.
Okay,
You want to hear testimony before you vote. You just want to put it on the table. So the motion and the second puts it on the table so that people can testify on that if they wish to.
Thank you. Excellent. Love it. Okay. Thank you, Morgan and Shannon. I'm sure we will have questions for you, Anon. Appreciate you in advance.
Sounds good.
Speaking of appreciation, we will begin oral testimony. We have one testifier. I just want to applaud you for your patience. Thank you so much for waiting and for allowing the previous process to take its time, which we needed. So Jackie Haddon, the floor is yours.
I'm recovering from a broken wrist, so pushing buttons is hard. My name is Jackie Haddon. I'm the co-founder of Livable Homes. We are an accessibility certification and consultation organization here in Portland. We serve the whole state of Oregon, but we're based here in Portland. I'm here today to speak out in support of the housing bonus alignment and to express some areas where I think we need just some further thought. I'm an accessibility specialist, I am in real estate, I'm a social worker, so I really embody all the sides of looking at social justice and looking at housing and understanding how we address housing in our city and our state. And I've been able to work with the state in developing their model codes for housing bonus, land use bonuses and incentives, and done some work with the city as well, which has been a lovely thing to be a part of. So while I'm here to support the Housing Bonus Alignment Project, I also want to make sure that we're pairing good policy with the two things that really bring our public on board, which is education and training, shifting a narrative around accessibility. So in housing, when we think of accessibility, it's usually capital A accessibility with ADA, and anyone in residential construction immediately does not want to do that because it's expensive and there's liabilities involved. And if you're not working in senior housing or affordable multifamily, that's hard to do. So what this Housing Bonus Alignment Project does is align with what the state is doing with defining accessibility as type A, B, and presenting bonus incentives to go along with that. But when we incentivize the bonuses and we don't have the education and the training backing that up, market rate, affordable, whoever it is with developing, is not going to come on board if there's not an economic advantage to taking on accessibility. So what we know, we do presentations all over the state. We've had incredible success talking to both affordable and market rate developers of understanding what do we mean by type A accessibility and what is the ROI of building this way. We can show that both nationally and in Portland, that homes that have a zero-step threshold, homes that have a main bathroom, accessible bathroom and bedroom on the main floor sell for about 9 to 13% higher, and they sell for about 50% less days on market. And this matters, right? Even if you get a bonus incentive, it matters if you're building homes for home ownership. You want people to buy them. And a lot of new construction is stagnant right now. So these are important things. If we're going to give these bonuses and incentives, we want to make sure that people will adopt them. We know this is a big issue. We know our housing production strategy called out that this is a growing population. We also know that the intersection between our older adult, our aging population, and our disabled population and population that needs more affordable housing, it intersects in terms of abilities and when those disabilities hit. What we have done is we've done this education. We've done education with developers and builders. We've done it with training. We would like to make the recommendation that in addition to supporting this, that we establish that there is for sure a minimum verified competency standard for residential building inspectors so that they can certify type A as opposed to ADA across the state. That's been a little tricky. We want to recognize the developer and design team education as a required component of the Accessible Housing Incentive Program, not an optional add-on. And we want to direct the OHCS to evaluate HB 3589. There's $500,000 for technical assistance that the state has mandated for older adult housing. I believe that money can be spent training inspectors. I believe that money can be spent getting the developers on board, and I think it should be. And that to make sure that any accessible unit receiving a density bonus or public subsidy be verified by a qualified third-party certifier, like an inspector. This happens in multifamily, but it hasn't happened in middle housing. It becomes residential instead of commercial, and this needs to be addressed and make sure that's codified as we move forward with this project. I believe this is good for our city, and I believe it's good for our developers and our building industry trades, but I think that we need to make sure we're marrying the policy and we're marrying the economics with education and advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And I believe this is also touching on another project that is coming before us in July, correct? So, yeah.
You might see me again.
I love it. And I will just say, as my friend recently lives in accessible housing and still had to get her own grab bars, which cost like $2,500. That, yeah. Great. Thank you very much, Jackie, and thank you again for your patience. Okay. And with that, if there's anyone else out here who wants to apparate in? No? Okay, we are closing the oral and written record testimony for this project, so thank you again for your input. And now, deliberation, discussion of amendments, thoughts, comments, and recognition that we have 2 amendments that we will be voting on before we go to full package. Vice Chair Spivak.
I think I have a question for staff. Thank you. We received, thank you for the testimony, Jackie, and I think that I'm a developer doing infill housing, and I do notice that we totally overbuilt infill housing with both bedrooms upstairs and none downstairs, and some developers, I just toured some projects, they're figuring out how to get downstairs bedrooms in the homes. So the market took a while to figure that out. So for staff, we had 2 written testimony pieces as well. I think that Zach's testimony was really geared towards what we now call RIP 3. We also, and I was out of town, so I just saw that the testimony came in from Sarah Radley, who had 2 ideas. One of them relates to the size of cottage courts, and the other relates to whether we might unintentionally be favoring garages detached rather than attached. And I'm just curious. I think on the first item, I think we do have discretion. On the second item, I'm not sure. Could you share on both those issues, whether we have discretion or not, and what you think of those ideas?
Thanks for the opening. Sarah Radley's testimony, written testimony we received addresses, as Commissioner Spivak mentioned, the cottage cluster common area in the proposal. I should set this up a little bit. For a cottage cluster under the current code, it needs a minimum of 3 units to be called a cottage cluster. As a result of changing the types of middle housing plexes that are allowed, triplexes and fourplexes that can now look very much like a cottage cluster, we are shifting the number of units required for a cottage cluster to 5. That's not required by the code, not required by the bill, but that distinction is pretty important in terms of differentiating regular middle housing types from cottage cluster housing types, and it gets a little bit into Zach Horton's testimony. That conversation is a little bit of RIP 3-ish. But what goes along with that change was the current requirement for open areas based on 150 square feet times 3 units, which created a 450 square foot minimum outdoor area standard. When we went to 5, we just increased that to 750, 150 times 5. Sarah's comment is that in some cases it might be more flexible to allow the common area to be split apart, still maintaining the 450 square foot minimum, but have 2 rather than 1. There's nothing in the bill that specifies one way or the other. So that is certainly up to the commission to entertain that suggestion. Just by way of staff's opinion on that, I don't think we really have a strong preference one way or the other. I do think that generally the issues around common area, there's a lot of issues we've experienced with the common areas and the cottage clusters, and I do think that will be on the ticket for the next project. But in terms of making this change and not, well, in terms of entertaining this suggestion and not making the change that we've proposed, it's sort of no harm, no foul. Sarah's second point about detached garage floor area in cottages does get a little bit more muddy because the state is currently developing rulemaking that addresses how cottage clusters are regulated, and that rulemaking isn't complete yet. It may contain elements that either include or exclude floor area for garages, and we don't know. So the timing of that is a little out of sequence, I guess. To address her objective, one of her concerns is that the current requirement for a garage, the current limitation on a cottage unit, rather, has a 900 square foot footprint and a 1,400 square foot average size. Adding a garage into that really eats into the living area. So if you want to have an attached garage, it discounts from your 1,400 square feet. If you detach it, it's sort of free and clear. The code does allow you to connect them via a breezeway, and you would still have a detached cottage in a separate garage structure. So in the interim, until we learn what the state wants to do about cottages, our suggestion would be to leave the current floor area requirement in place, which maintains the 1,400 square foot average and allows for the detached accessory structures to be, 200 to 400 square feet and connected if that's what is desired. So that's, I don't know if that rambling gets to your questions.
I think that helps. I think that, what's the timing on RIP 3?
Well, that's a great question. We are looking at sometime in the next year getting that project started. So after this one is complete, 27 would be, well, I should look over to my boss here and see if she has corrections to this, but basically kicking off the next project in 2027.
Okay, well, that helps. I mean, as context, I met with staff, ready with a lot of questions, and I think they did a great job of addressing the state rules. And there was one person I wanted to hear from, Sarah Rattle. I used to work reviewing plan development for the city and does most of this consulting, so I was curious what she had to come up with. And I think that I'm not generally in favor of providing the incentive for detached garages over attached ones, but it's not all that much time, and I think I'm not going to propose any amendments on this and just hold those for later. If staff thought, oh, these are good ideas that we missed, then I would be interested in staff proposing an amendment on it. So I guess that's my way of saying I have no amendments. I like this project.
Great, yeah. Commissioner Alvarado.
Just a curiosity question. I'm curious if the state provided avenues for, like having shared utility or things of that nature. Like they share like recommendations what cities should do for when people have conflicts, if there's there's sewer breaks, and is it HOAs that they would be setting? Is there? Cause I'm just curious.
Yeah, interestingly, so I should start there. When you're doing a middle housing development, a fourplex or a cottage cluster, you can convey those as ownership units either through a condominium, which would have an HOA, or through a middle housing land division, which is a way of creating fee simple lots, which doesn't necessitate an HOA, but you could still have one. In the latter case, the middle housing land divisions, there are maintenance agreements that go along with those plats. So the maintenance agreements spell out the responsibility of the owners to share certain costs for upkeep and maintenance and repair. When we first started reviewing these developments, there was a requirement that the utilities all be separate. So each person had a separate sewer lateral that went out to the street. And what our Environmental Services Bureau realized was that meant puncturing the main line repeatedly. And each one of those creates sort of a fragile condition. And the more times you perforate the pipe, the worse it gets. So they quickly realized that combining They had a alternative process where they could combine laterals into a single larger private main that then went into the public main with additional cleanouts for maintenance and so forth. They could approve that through an alternative process. And then the state, learning from our experience, added that as an option for middle housing land divisions just by matter of course. So it's basically handled through the easements or the HOA agreements, but but it will remain to be seen what happens in 20, 25 years for these sort of interesting, different setups. Yeah.
Other questions? Last comments? Yeah.
I am not able to access the proposed draft. Is that just me? In the email or online? So the city's archive software is under regular maintenance from 5 to 10 p.m.
Oh,
tonight.
okay, so I'm just late.
So
I just wanted to make sure it has been available. And of course, now I'm admitting how tardy I am in doing my homework.
It's too large to email, but I can try and do it in chunks.
That's okay. My concern was just that it has been available and, hearing that we had only 2 pieces of testimony, right? So I don't think this is certainly not an amendment, but going back to the testimony that was provided, maybe for our transmittal letter, something around supporting technical assistance for developers. In our affordable housing development, we bring on ADA consultants. That does come, of course, at an extra cost. So I was excited to hear there might be HCS funding. So just a note that is something I'd like to hold space for in the letter. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other questions, thoughts? Does everyone, within the constraint of regular archives maintenance, do we feel that we have, does everyone have enough information? Have you shared, is there anything else that you would like to share for the good of other commissioners during their considerations? Okay, well then we have 2 technical amendments to first call the roll on and then the full package, correct? Great.
So vote for the technical amendments. Commissioner Alvarado?
Aye.
Commissioner Ames?
Aye.
Commissioner Brannon?
Yes.
Commissioner Knowles is no longer with us this evening online, had to step out. So Commissioner O'Meara?
Yes.
Vice Chair Pollock?
Yes.
Vice Chair Spivak?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Aye.
And Chair Routh.
Yes.
The amendments pass with 8 votes.
And could we pull up the, is there a slide with the language for the, oh,
This one. This one.
there she is. Okay, great. I'll go ahead and I would like to propose, move that we recommend City Council to adopt the project report and amend Title 33 as per this slide. I'd like to.
Second.
Beat you to it. Great. Any last discussion before we vote and then go to transmittal letter? Delightful.
This is a vote on the full package for the State Land Use Compliance Project. Commissioner Alvarado?
Yes.
Commissioner Ames?
Aye.
Commissioner Brannon?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Meara?
Yes.
Vice Chair Pollock?
Yes.
Vice Chair Spivak?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Aye.
And Chair Routh.
Yes.
The project passes with 8 votes.
And don't cry for Commissioner Knowles. He is in the Sawtooth Mountains. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Transmittal letter. Commissioner O'Meara.
Yeah, I think I offered my comments, but recognizing that developers could use technical assistance, I think is a good thing. And to the extent that there are resources made available by the city or state, especially for affordable housing developers, would be of service.
Love it. Morgan is, thank you very much. Other thoughts?
You have a thought? I mean, I think that if people have noticed some of these cottage clusters that have been built around town, sometimes they look like barracks where there's all these little homes separated by 6 feet from each other. I think one of the things this project will, and you cannot make them attached to each other even if you want to, which would be much better from an environmental perspective because of shared heat between buildings, less exterior skin, all those reasons. This project will allow people to do attached ones up to 4 in a row, which I think I think developers will use that provision and it'll end up with nicer looking projects. At least I hope so. Thanks.
Generally, clear is kind, and when we can align code, we are kind. Others, is that enough? Boilerplate?
We can make that work.
Great. Lovely. Okay, well, we're done with that one. And we are, let us just continue. Which is it? The Housing Bonus Alignment Project will come before us July 28th. Is that correct? Okay, July 28th at 5 p.m. Before you leave, particularly around the street renaming, if there's any thoughts that you have that you want us to consider and transmit a letter, my pen and paper are ready and craving your thoughts. Anything else for the last bit of the good of the order for release you to beginning of summer? Thank you all for seeing democracy in action in all of its messy glory today, and for being part of this. And with that, we are adjourned. And thank you again to OpenSignal for allowing us to be heard.